Afro-Arab. That's fine. You might be, some of you might be yourself. That's fine. But you please let me state my own views on the subject. I really believe strongly that Islam had conquered Europe. The automobile, the airplane, the computer would not have been invented. We'd not see telephone poles. We'd have come to our classroom in horses. You can argue that if you want to. Islam has contributed or invented very little in the last 1,000 years, frightfully little. And why? They don't allow their people the freedom to disagree or dissent. And you know, if you want to comment, your comments are welcome. Even if you know I won't like what you're going to say. Anyway, the Crusades was Europe's attempt to take the offensive. I mean, you know, you watch a football game, you have to play defense some, but then you take the ball. I mean, you can't win a game just playing defense. You've got to carry the ball in the other team's territory. We lost the Vietnam War because we decided we're only going to go to the 50-yard line, and we're not going to go farther than the 50-yard line. In the meantime, the enemy decided they're going to go all the way to the goal line. Pick the winner. Well, the Crusades were started when it looked like the Christian Byzantine Empire was going to be overrun. So the emperor of the Byzantine Emperor called for help from the West. The Westerners responded. The Crusades were to last from 1095 until 1290, a period of some 200 years, almost 200 years, 195 years. They ended largely, all right, the last one occurred in 1290, but in 1347, the Black Death hit Europe, and Europe was in no shape to fight Crusades. Now, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. In the short run, the Crusades were a military victory for the Muslims. But in the long run, after 1290, after Europe had gone to Black Death, Europe developed better technology than Islam had, developed better cannon, better gunpowder, better rifles, and all told better weaponry. And they conquered almost every Muslim country. France got Algeria and most of the Sahara Desert. Italy got Libya. England, Great Britain got the Middle East, including Egypt and the Anglo-Egyptian Sudan. You won't find out on the map. If you also Sudan, Britain got all these places. Basically, Europeans went in as individual nations, not as a group, and conquered most of Muslim territory, which after World War II they gave back. All right, but back to the time period we're talking about. There were some 200 crusades during a 200-year period. Of those, only 9 of them were really important, but I'm going to only mention 4. Crusade number 1, 2, 3, and 4. Crusade number 1 was the only one that was a military victory for the Christians. It caught the Muslim world unprepared and off guard. They set up a few kingdoms, including the King of Jerusalem, and to this day the Spanish king calls himself King of Jerusalem. Because he says, I'm descended from a man who had the title, and one day he believes he or his descendants are going to go back in and retake the city of Jerusalem. And Crusade number 1, won by Europe. Crusade number 2, that's the one led by King Louis VII and his wife Eleanor of Aquitaine went along with 50 other women. Crusade number 2 accomplished nothing. It did not really, well, it lost and they finally gave up, but they did not conquer any more territory. They didn't lose any either, but Crusade number 2 went to, I'd say it was kind of a tie, a draw. And then after that, each crusade was less successful than before. Now, Crusade number 3, this one was led by 3 kings. Frederick Barbarossa, Frederick I, that is, who was Holy Roman Emperor, Philip Augustus, the King of France, and Richard, the King of England, Richard the Lionhearted. And everybody knew this one would succeed. However, opposing these rulers was Saladin. Saladin is made, you're going to run into this a lot in the years ahead. In the case of Saladin, he made news back in 1990 because Saddam Hussein claimed that he was descended from two men, Nebuchadnezzar and Saladin. He liked both men, Nebuchadnezzar because Nebuchadnezzar had conquered Jerusalem, and he liked Saladin because Saladin drove the Crusaders out of the Holy Land. And was he descended from both of them? Well, probably was, because, let's face it, you go back, let's see, from Saddam Hussein to Saladin, you're going back 900 years. That means it's more than 1 million people living at that time were ancestors to Saddam Hussein. So probably one of them was Saladin, but even though he could not prove it. Nevertheless, I mean, am I descended from William the Conqueror? Most likely, because I have 1 million ancestors from that time period, or more. Some of them, though, are the same. On different, the lines come together after a while. But anyway, Saladin was the most able leader that the Islamic world has ever had. He was a man who could persuade all sides to join with him. Well, in the case of the Europeans, Frederick Barbarossa drowned. Philip Augustus turned back, and of course, when these kings quit, their entire armies went back home with them. That left only Richard. Richard tried hard. Unfortunately, Richard was no match for Saladin. Saladin won that one and drove the Crusaders out of Jerusalem. The Crusaders were never able to reconquer the area again. Now, the Fourth Crusade. Do you remember it? The Fourth Crusade went and sacked Constantinople, took over Constantinople. For more than 40 years, the Byzantines could not get into their own capital. They went into the wilderness and ran as best they could from the gap. Eventually, they got enough strength to drive the Westerners out of the city. But the Fourth Crusade, the Crusades that were supposed to have strengthened the Byzantine Empire against Islam, wound up being the thing that destroyed Islam. The Fourth Crusade was mainly blamed for the downfall of the Byzantine Empire. Now, that's the main crusades. Now, there's another crusade I always mention, and I do include it on my final because I do mention it's not, and I don't believe your book does mention it. There were two movements called the Children's Crusade. 50,000 children, all of them like under the age of 20. And folk don't ask me how their parents ever allowed them to go, and don't ask me how they ever decided to go. They believed that they could do what their grown-ups had not done. None of them got past Constantinople. Everyone who took part in the Children's Crusade was either killed or sold into slavery. This one man I read compared to the story of the Pied Piper, who had piped beautiful music and lured the children to caves, and after that the children never sing again. Oh. Believe what you will. Yeah, this story is a common story from old folklores. Hopefully none of you might never have heard of it till now. But this story about the Pied Piper. Have you ever heard the story of the Pied Piper? Okay, one hand's going up. Anyway, two hands. All right. Yeah, it was a famous story, and some people say this is what they're talking about. All right, now, folk. All this was occurring during the High Middle Ages. Farmers were cooperating. Everything was going along great. The High Middle Ages came to a sudden, abrupt end around the year 1347. Now, you all know what I'm about to say is believed to have caused it. The climate cooled down. How do we know this? Because farmers would plant crops, and the frost would get the crops. The frost would get them into, for instance, a farmer might plant a crop in April, like he always had, and then the frost come along in May. Or he might plant a crop in April and no frost come in May, June, July, and August, but a frost come along late in August when it shouldn't have come in until October. And the frost would destroy the crop just as it was about to ripen. This led to starvation and a decrease in resistance to disease. Now, about this time, when the Mongolians came across from Europe, following them was a bunch of rats. The black rat carried the tick that caused, the tick carried the disease that caused the Black Death. These rats' ticks would not only live on rats, but they would also live on humans. No, they did not bother cats. I mean, if you know anything about parasitology, a flea or a tick might just love to dwell on rats and suck the blood out of rats. And most fleas and ticks that like rats also like humans, but hate dogs and cats or pigs or chickens or sheep or any such animal. The worst thing that happened to Europe at the time, a pope, Pope Gregory VII, I believe, decided that cats were of the devil and ordered that cats be killed, particularly black cats. Now, folks, this is something I just learned this year. I did know that old maids and Jews did not die from the Black Death. All of you know that, and this is known, even in 1347, old maids would tend to keep cats around. As for the Jews, they felt like, well, hey, what the Pope says doesn't apply to us. We're not Christian anyway, so the Jews do not kill their cats. Oh yeah. So guess what? When the Black Death hit, the Jews survived it. The old maids survived also, and they were both hated and accused of witchcraft. So they were persecuted for not, because they didn't die of the Black Death. Now, there are two other things I want to say about the Jews. Number one, Moses had told them that every year before you harvest, in the fall, clean out your barns and burn everything you have not eaten. In other words, all your wheat and the stuff that you haven't eaten, burn it. In other words, clean out your garners and your barns. So the Jews would every year clean out their barns and burn what they hadn't eaten. This, of course, helped get rid of the rats because, number one, the cats would have an easier time finding them. And number two, of course, a clean barn meant that the rats had to go somewhere else to find food. And also, Moses had told the Jews to keep clean over and over again. Wash yourselves, clean yourselves, wash your hands before you eat, things that the Jews observed. All this helped the Jews not get the Black Death, and everybody then accused them of witchcraft. The Black Death killed 1/3 of Europe's population, and yes, at this time, you had a song come out that we used to sing when I was a kid on our recesses. Ring around the roses, pockets full of posies. Ashes, ashes, we all fall down. That song harks back to the Black Death. I mean, they believed that put your posies in your pockets. It would ward off the disease. And I don't know if it was very effective or not, but it was still, we all ashes when we die. They wouldn't bury the bodies because that might explode. They would actually, in a lot of cases, burn the bodies, thinking that would help get rid of the Black Death, which to some extent maybe it did. But we all fall down, meant we're all dying. We're all going to die. So one now, did any good come out of the Black Death? Seemed like one of you wrote a paper about that. It might have been this class, the other one. One thing your book says came out of it is that wages went up. Because there were so few workers, the nobles had to pay, they tried stealing each other's workers by offering the workers higher wages. So the nobles then kept less of the pie while the common workers got more. Another thing, it made Europeans less fearful of death, which is one thing that's believed to have led Europeans to spread out over the globe. Now, strangely enough, yes, death and disease struck India and struck China also. So again, that's what leads us to believe it was climate change. Yeah, climate change in the other direction. It cooled down. Oh, I want to remind you, how many ever heard of the woolly mammoth? It's now extinct. The woolly mammoth was grazing one day in hot weather. The plants he was eating, as we can tell by the content of the stomach, in warm weather plants, within 2 or 3 minutes, they were frozen to death. And some of them still standing up. Is that climate change or isn't it? And it's sudden. Now, folk, I don't know what to make of this, but there's a man who several years ago predicted that the global warming was real, but it would end in October 2018. And October 2018 was a hot month, for longer than it should have been. And the next ice age would begin in November 2018. Maybe it's not far, and it would come on us suddenly.
It did feel pretty cold yesterday.
Even colder today. But now wait a minute, I'm not talking just about Georgia. In Chicago, they're having to cancel flights, they're having to cancel meetings. They're under a big snowstorm, and my sister who lives in, I have 3 sisters who live in southwestern Ohio. They're threatened with a much lighter snow, but New England is under a huge snow warning. Now, folks, that's not a record, but it's not usual for November. In other words, even Kurt Close said this is more like January weather, even here, than November weather.
So why is it super high and then super cold?
Because, okay, I'm gonna answer that. Because the sun itself above us is cooling down. All right, being a ham operator, maybe if you know amateur radio, I keep up with the sunspots. When you have a low sunspot cycle, it means it's harder to communicate by means of radio, shortwave radio. Some of you might know what I'm talking about. Because these radio waves reflect off the ionosphere and then back down. It's called skip. But when you have no sunspots for as long as we're having them, it might be a sign that the sun is cooling. Now, I know if you read your right documents, say there's no connection between sunspots, but we have not been observing it that long. There are persons who believe that the sun goes through 350-year cycles. All right, the high Middle Ages was hotter than we've had it. It got cold. The next cycle was after the 14 and 1500s. It did not get as hot as the high Middle Ages. When it got cold in the 1690s, it got colder than it did in the 1300s, 1680. It got rid of millions of people in India and China and Europe died. Then the last sunspot cycle, high sunspot, ended around 2016, about 3 or 4 years ago. It did not get as high, and we don't know how low it's going to go. We have days on end, weeks without sunspots. Mankind and his emissions and carbon emissions have absolutely nothing to do with it, contrary to what you might have heard. And if you want to argue with me, go ahead. I won't argue. I'll listen to you. But I'll just let me state my case on it. Again, why so suddenly? Because the sun above us cools down. I mean, hey, I went through the 1983 total eclipse. It was a total eclipse at Piedmont Park, and I was working at Lockheed. I stepped out, I mean, everybody did, so I stepped outside at Lockheed to look at it, and this was in late May, and the temperature dropped by about 20 degrees in a matter of a few minutes. It warmed back up when the eclipse moved off fast. We had an eclipse here a few days ago, well, a year ago. We had an eclipse. It wasn't total here, but I mean, yeah, a year ago. But in 1983, there was a total eclipse at Piedmont Park. And Lockheed experienced a real darkness. I mean, it got really dark, and it turned drastically cold in a matter of little bit of time, folk. And of course, like I say, we all forgot about it. It warmed back up. Of course, the eclipses are predicted. Again, folk, how can I prove this? We can't, but we don't have the accurate enough records to know. The sunspots were first discovered in 1610, and for the next couple of years, all we have is drawings. And the ability of the artist might be called, but we have a lot of drawings, which is all we have to go by. Then came the invention of the camera in the early 1800s, around 1840, and then we started taking pictures of the sun. We have sunspot records. If our sunspot record went back 2,000 years, we might know more than we do.
So you're saying that the sunspot is a cooler part of the sun that's pointing towards us?
No, the sunspot is a hot part of the sun, and when the sunspots go, the temperature of the sun drops. Yeah, and when the temperature of the sun drops drastically, the temperature of the whole solar system drops. Now, I want to say this about global, then I'll close. There are some people who say that global warming was noticed all the way on the planets Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. The problem with that is we don't know how hot these planets were 3, 4, 5, and 6, 700 years ago. But they thought they observed a warming trend on these outer planets, which could not have been caused by man-made carbon emissions. Are they? Again, if what I'm saying is right, if you look on the right web pages, I mean, folks, it's a wise idea. Look for the other opinion. I mean, it's one thing for the government science to say global warming is going to destroy us all. Donald Trump says, I don't believe it. Obviously, I don't either. It's another thing. Look for the opposite side of the view. It's fundamental logic, fundamental common sense. And remember what I said earlier. No scientific view is so fixed that it can never be questioned again. Now, this is so proven that we don't ever, there's no such thing as that. I mean, in the case of legal law, there's such a thing as case closed. I mean, but that's great. I mean, that's a privilege, I believe, in law. There's such a thing as double jeopardy in legal. If you haven't proven your case the first time, you don't get another chance. That's if you're dealing with human beings, I agree with it. Double jeopardy has no place in science. If you haven't proven your case the first time, you can prove it, try again and again and again. Case closed never happens in science. Okay, everybody, have a good weekend. I hope